Meme Ranch.
Welcome back, everyone, to the Meme Ranch podcast. Today, I have on guest Patrick Courrielche. He is the host of Red Pilled America, and I just wanted to bring on Patrick to have a fun sort of trip down memory lane conversation, and also to kind of get at his upbringing with his start in the Hollywood sphere of media before he later branched out into more of the conservative right of center media space and having a very successful show on iHeartRadio, and talking a little bit about his backstory and his intersections with the conservative legend Andrew Breitbart, and sort of what took place in the 2010s that was of magnitude, and the story that Patrick broke that really shaped the narrative around some of the propaganda apparatus of the Obama administration. So, Patrick, thank you so much for coming on.
Thanks for having me. I really appreciate it.
Now, Patrick, I guess let's just kind of start right there. I mean, tell us a little bit about why you, not why you got into conservative media, but just a little bit about your career and how it started, and how you were really sort of embedded in Hollywood, and what were you even doing?
Yeah, well, let's see. I had an advertising business in from around 2003 on, and I was doing what's called branded content in the Hollywood community, where you get a brand to finance short films, music videos, documentaries, that kind of a thing. And prior to that, I'd done concert promotion. I'd also worked in aerospace for about 5 years. I had a master's in applied physics, and so I was doing this kind of advertising thing, and I'd do short documentaries on like Questlove, who's the drummer on the Jimmy Fallon show, or did a documentary on Biz Markie, who's a big hip hop guy, hip hop rapper guy, and things like that. And so when the Obama administration came along, or I should say when the 2008 race came along, I was kind of still what I think Andrew Breitbart would call a default liberal. I went to Hillary Clinton fundraiser events at Hollywood, like kind of the young Hollywood events in Hollywood, and was considered myself, I guess, a Hillary backer. Although I wasn't really thinking too much about politics. It was just kind of like just going on, like I said, the default kind of liberal vibe at the time. I having worked in the entertainment world and worked in entertainment for quite some time, it just kind of soaks in your system. And I had worked in, like I said earlier, a concert promoter. I had helped launch the Coachella Festival here in Palm Springs, which was kind of a big deal at that time. And so I'm just kind of soaked in liberal politics. Then along comes Obama, and he shockingly usurps Hillary Clinton. And I remember at that time thinking, wow, how could this be happening? And I was actually kind of very intrigued by Obama's packaging. Coming from a marketing background, I thought, man, this guy is like packaged well. He speaks well. He looks good. He's dressed well. He has this kind of interesting team behind him. And so at first I was kind of, into him for a brief second. My wife quickly, took that away from me, just saying, I don't trust this guy at all. And you kind of got to go by a woman's instinct. And I started to look at him and thinking, this guy's, he is kind of a little bit full of it. And so as he started to pass Hillary Clinton, I started to look at media, or look for media that would kind of give her a fair shot. And I landed on, of all people, Bill O'Reilly. And he had a show on Fox News called The O'Reilly Factor. And now I found myself watching Fox News, the Death Star. And I was like, wow, I can't believe I'm actually watching Fox News. And as I started watching Bill O'Reilly more and more, I started to think, man, this guy makes a lot of sense. And of course, as you're watching a guy like that, you're not only picking up the Hillary Clinton Obama kind of feud that's going on, but you're also picking up kind of conservative politics. And I just found myself, resonating with a lot of what Bill O'Reilly had to say at that time during the 2008 campaign. And then Obama beats Hillary, and he goes up against McCain, and I did what I thought I could never do, and I started to support McCain and support his running mate Palin, and that just kind of held through the election. And then Obama, of course, wins, and I'm thinking I'm still in the liberal kind of party. I'm still in the Democrat. So I mean, I think at some point I even like donated to his transition team. And at that time, I was very kind of heavily involved in the arts, and I had an employee that was working with me, and I also had a previous business partnership with this guy named Shepard Fairey. Shepard Fairey was the guy that did the Hope poster, the huge Obama Hope poster that just, if you have any kind of vision of the 2008 campaign, it's this Obama Hope poster. And I actually connected Shepard with an employee of mine, and they promoted that poster to kind of together. It was kind of a group project. And so I kind of was, still kind of felt a little bit connected to the Democrat Party. And then as his administration starts to go, I'm just like, this guy he feels like a socialist to me. Like, and I learned about socialism in college, and at first it sounded great until you get out into the real world, and you have a kid, and you get married, and you're like, God, this is just not. It's a proven concept that just doesn't work. And so there comes a point where this socialism poster starts going viral in the Hollywood area, and it was basically a poster of Obama as the Joker, Batman's Joker, and it had under him under the image said socialism. And I thought, oh, it was literally right in my backyard. I lived at the time right in the Hollywood Hills, and I would come down for my run, and I'd see this poster on the street. And I'm like, wow, this is like right here in the center of liberal Hollywood. And I noticed the media started immediately calling it racist, and immediately started saying that it was a kind of a racist kind of a campaign. And so I thought, well, I'm going to write something about this. First time I ever write anything, publish anything in my life. I wrote a little piece basically saying, making the argument that arts is supposed to challenge, political movements and power. I published that with reason.org, reason.com, Reason Magazine. And it was my first kind of thing that I'd ever written, and it's the first thing I've ever published. And I get reached out. I get an email from a guy that I'd never heard of before. His name is Andrew Breitbart. And he says, "Hey, I really like your piece. There's this community of like-minded people in Hollywood I want to connect you with, and I think you'd really love it." We got on the phone, and if anybody that knew Andrew back in the day, it was kind of like we had known each other for years. Right off the bat, he was at some conference, I think, learning about the Federalist Papers, and he said he decided that if he was going to be taking on the Obama administration, he needed to know more about the founding. I mean, the guy had an American, I think, American Studies degree, so he already was in that realm, but he wanted to know even more. It was just kind of the nature of Andrew. So we became friends, but I hadn't really publicly been announced as like a right of center guy, because I didn't think I was at the time. And right before that piece went public or was published on Reason, I get an invite to a White House conference call from my old employee that I connected with Shepard Fairey. He had been appointed by the Obama administration as the director of communications at the National Endowment for the Arts. And at that time, the Obamacare debate had gone crazy. Town halls were exploding. You'd have people going to these events and yelling at their congressmen, and the debate was shifting heavily against the Obama administration. And so that was kind of the context of getting this invite. And I look at the invite, and it's kind of talking about like the topics that are pretty hot and heavy being discussed in the legacy media at the time. And so I thought, this seems kind of strange to come from the National Endowment for the Arts director. It's the largest funder of the arts in the country. And I thought, I'm going to go check this thing out. And so I talked about it with my wife, and we decided, yeah, let's go check it out and see what they're all about. And so I call into the number, and I get my shiny new iPhone in front of me. At that time, the iPhones were kind of like, kind of new gadgets, some semi new gadgets. And I call into this number, and it was a one-way broadcast. Imagine it being it was almost like a radio broadcast, but over your phone. You could not like communicate with them. So, I said, "Okay, I'm just going to record this call and see, so I could look back at it. I want to get it right. If I'm going to write about this at some point, or if I'm going to discuss this at all, to the public, I want to record it and see, what this, and be able to analyze it." So I hit my phone in front of the speakerphone. I hit record the thing. And as I'm listening to this conference call, it just sounded very eerie to me. And at the end of the day, I felt like they were trying to inspire artists to create political art in the favor of the Obama administration, and in particular about the healthcare fight, and kind of pro Obamacare art, I should say. And so I'm listening to this, and someone gets on from the White House. Her name was Buffy Wicks, and so there's direct White House connection to it. And I'm like, you know what? This doesn't feel right to me. I mean, these are the people, and National Endowment for the Arts are the people that literally give out art grants to the art world. And here they are, excuse me, asking the art world to create art in support of the Obama administration's political kind of campaign. So I decide I want to write something. I take it to Reason. I go back and forth with Reason for about a week. They don't seem like they're responsive enough. But Andrew, my new friend, was all over it. He's like, I would love to publish this for you. He had a website called Big Hollywood. And so he said, I will publish this for you. I didn't tell him that I had recorded the conversation, but I just said I went to the conference call, and it was strange to me. And so I published a piece with him called, I believe it was called the National Art of Persuasion, something along those lines. And it immediately, a conservative media picked it up. And at that time, there was a really robust alternative media blogosphere. And it was a kind of a just burgeoning at the time. There'd been, previous websites before Breitbart, but Breitbart had really kind of created this collective of writers from Hollywood and from the entertainment world and from media, kind of all came on. And so they came up with follow-up pieces on my story. You got guys like Ben Shapiro, and you had guys like Steven Crowder, and that's kind of the level of people that at the very beginning of their kind of careers, kind of writing up follow-up pieces and calling out the Obama administration. And at the time, Andrew had control of the front page of the Drudge Report. And so he started pointing the Drudge Report to the story, and it started gaining steam. And you had Rush Limbaugh did a story on it, and then Glenn Beck is the one that really grabbed it. And I went on Glenn Beck's show, and we kind of discussed it there. And at that time, the White House was denying, any wrongdoing. They denied that they even invited me to this conference call. And I think they knew immediately that they had a problem on their hands, because you're not supposed to use these agencies as kind of vehicles to promote political endeavors. It's called
Almost like a flagrant Hatch Act violation,
it's
right?
exactly that. And Trump and Andrew was asking behind the scenes, and he was getting information from kind of political experts and kind of veterans in the field that they it looks like they violated the Hatch Act. So they played the denial game, and the legacy media was brilliant at just kind of like ignoring stories that they didn't want to deal with. And so I kept releasing more and more stories, and then I went on the Glenn Beck show, and I released a little bit of the audio, and that audio was kind of a big deal at the time, because Glenn Beck had just gotten a scalp with Van Jones, who had been in the White House. He'd got him to resign over some video that he had published. And so it just kept gaining steam and gaining steam and gaining steam. And then Andrew releases this Acorn report And now you have these two big stories in the media that are just a direct, attacks on the Obama administration and their use of kind of the apparatus of Washington D.C. for political gain. And eventually, the White House had to respond. I had an interview with CBS News. I went down to CBS News, and they did a long interview with me, and they were getting ready to put it on the big shows of CBS, and they caught wind because, of course, we know when you do these reports, you ask for a comment from the White House, and the White House caught wind that I was now going to be on the major networks. And so they immediately said, "Okay, we're done with this. We have to end this right now." So they basically they forced a resignation from the guy from the National Endowment for the Arts, and they issued this long kind of guidelines of these conduct guidelines, and basically admitted that I was right, and said that they would never going to let it happen again. And that was kind of my introduction into the legacy media. I should say, and this is something that this is probably the first time I've ever said this, and this is something that I've been wanting to articulate at some point. Jake Tapper puts out this story on my expose, let's say, of the National Endowment for the Arts in the White House. And he opens it by trying to marginalize my reporting by saying that I secretly recorded a White House conference call. Now, as I said earlier, this was a one-way broadcast, conference call. There's no way for me to tell them that I was recording. It was like listening to a radio on your phone. So for him to say secretly really was a huge impact on me and my career. At the time, I had an advertising business, and now I'm being accused by one of the biggest legacy media networks in the United States of secretly recording a White House conference call. And he never called me and asked me for a comment or anything like that. It was purely to minimize my credibility and minimize the story in general as this kind of sneaky guy that will record, the White House conference calls. And so, but it was my kind of first introduction into this national media apparatus. And I should say before that, we've had plenty of national coverage from some of our advertising business and our marketing world and our film world. But this is the first kind of adversarial, heavily adversarial kind of um, uh, interaction that I had with legacy media. But it opened my door to this whole new world. Andrew brought me into this thing called the Friends of Abe, which is this, at the time, was the secret Hollywood conservative club where, you had guys like, Gary Sinise started it, and you had guys like Clint Eastwood and Sylvester Stallone kind of connected to this thing, and John Voight, and kind of these, big Hollywood veterans. And then you have like some small up and coming people, guys like Jeremy Boring at the time was in the film business, and he was getting, was part of this group. So we would meet, every once in a while. We'd have like meetups, and we'd have these big conferences that we kind of go to. Once again, it was kind of all kind of anonymous. It wasn't like publicly announced to the public. It was kind of a very secret kind of a organization, because Hollywood's a company town, and it could seriously, at that time especially, impact your ability to get work afterwards. And so I was off and running, and I think after that, and seeing how the conservative media would kind of, was this burgeoning atmosphere and this kind of exciting new space, and you had the legacy media and their kind of their blogosphere below them that was kind of protecting the Washington D.C. establishment and what have you. It was kind of an interesting time to kind of come into politics.
Yeah, and I think that opens up a good follow up question, and something I wanted to ask you about even before you mentioned the Jake Tapper part of it. But that in and of itself is a sign of just how antagonistic it feels like the legacy media, the left of center aligned media, the art world aligned media sort of reacts whenever they get confronted with this piece of information. They start digging in for any potential attack lines that they can go for. And I'm curious, just, at that point, whenever Tapper had that address, what was the response among your peers, some of your peers in Hollywood, the ones that you had sort of established connections with back when you were still considering yourself more democratic aligned or more left wing aligned. What was their sort of reaction? Did they try to oust you or make you a pariah of sorts? What was that like?
Yes, definitely. Yes. I mean, I had guys that I had known for years, calling for my head. People would showed up to my house and keyed my car and deflate the tires and that kind of a thing. And they tried to come at me pretty hard for a while there. The thing that you start to learn though in Hollywood is that if you have control of budget, people tend to not be so aggressive, at least not long term. You had the most active kind of activist people coming at me for quite some time afterwards, but I had control of budget at the time. Big kind of budget from a couple of my clients that I could still do these big projects, and so it didn't entirely oust me from the Hollywood community. It took, I think, the Trump administration before that actually happened, where fast forward a little bit, as the campaign kind of, or as the Obama administration started to evolve, and I started to see kind of how you had to have some pretty sharp elbows, and you had to be very kind of acclimated to getting attacked by being in the conservative media at that time. And there was a time, I think, right leading up to the 2012 campaign where both myself, Breitbart News, and James O'Keefe were all being audited by the IRS, and I thought, man, these guys are pretty vicious. It was right leading up to the 2012 election, so I thought, man, they're trying to quiet a lot of these voices that had some pretty direct impact on them at the 2009 time frame. And I say that I kind of stepped back a little bit from conservative media, or just being kind of like just getting involved in kind of reporting at that time. I also had some big projects that were on the side. I did this global warming debate, and it was kind of like I had a proponent of global warming and a skeptic of global warming, and I would bring all these Hollywood comedians as mediators. I had Sarah Silverman as a mediator, and I had
Mm-hmm.
Tracy Morgan and Adam Sandberg, and a lot of these kinds of big comedians at the time. And we created a web series on that. And so I thought, okay, this is going to be my lane. I'm going to do kind of these kind of thought provoking campaigns, web campaigns, films, what have you. And I'll stay in that lane, and that will be my
Mm-hmm.
thing. And then and it was, kind of a big deal. We'd have like all these celebrities come out to our events, and I still at that time was not completely kind of being pushed out of the Hollywood community. Then Trump came along, and in 2015, the summer of 2015, he started to get pretty heavily attacked by, conservatives, and I was like, well, this is not. I think this is not a smart thing. You guys got to start taking this guy seriously. I had been a Trump fan for years. I mean, going back to the '90s. But at one point I did a story on Trump, and I remember looking back at my journal, and I had notes on him in the early 2000s about just fans of The Apprentice show, and me and my wife would watch The Apprentice all the time and be like, he gets it right every time. Like this guy is firing the right people every time, and as business owners, we just kind of loved that. So, anyways, Trump comes along. He's getting attacked by all these conservatives, and so I decided I'm going to write a piece for Breitbart, kind of maybe step back into the foray a little bit. And I wrote a piece at that time, kind of telling conservatives, "Hey," and I opened it with a picture of me and Hillary Clinton. I was at a Hillary Clinton fundraiser, and here I am with Hillary. Yet, fast forward a couple years, and now I'm kind of this big kind of voice against the Obama administration. And I was saying, "Hey, if people change." And if you're worried about this guy being, this kind of liberal in disguise, kind of in wolf in sheep's clothing, I don't think that's the case here. At least let's hear this guy out. He could uh, end up being a huge political force. Well, I didn't know at the time, but at some point, the Breitbart organization hires um, Steve Bannon, and at that time, I was like in the middle of the Hollywood community. My daughter went to this really prestigious elementary school. It's kind of these schools that, and people that don't know it, there are these little kind of hubs in Hollywood that Hollywood people try to desperately get involved with because it puts you in the middle of studio heads and actors and what have you. And we got into this elementary school, and I had in our class we have Jason Bateman's kid, so I'd be sitting next to Jason Bateman in like circles, like family circles, and you'd have Adam Scott, who's the lead in Severance, and just people like that, heads of studios. Melissa McCarthy ended up having a kid in our class, and Van Jones had a kid in our school. So it was just a big Hollywood world. And now you have the Trump administration, or the Trump campaign, in the heat of this fight with Hillary Clinton. They just hired Steve Bannon from Breitbart. Well, news started to spread like crazy that they had a Breitbart guy at this school. And who was it? It was, Patrick Courrielche and Adriana Cortez. They're connected to Breitbart. And we immediately became this kind of this pariah. And the news had gotten out at this school that we had been uh, you know, right of center conservatives, because a couple years earlier, this is going to sound crazy and it's going to sound like a side note, but I think a lot of people will find this fascinating. We caught this guy getting in bed with other people's kids, a parent at this school. And there was like 3 or 4 different parents that this had happened with their kids. And
Oh
so
my
we
God.
eventually, it was kind of a shocking thing, and it was our very first story on Red Pilled America. We kind of started our storytelling series with that. But um, I'll give you the brief abridged version of it. We catch this guy getting in bed with other people's kids. We slowly but surely, through kind of having friendships within the school, that information starts to percolate, and everybody starts talking about it within our friend group. And so we confront this guy, and at first he denied it, and eventually he came. We forced the situation. He claimed he was going to try to sue us, and we said, "That's not. We're not afraid of you, and we will not stop talking about this until you basically say you're never going to do this again." And so he stopped. He said he would stop doing it, and he got it all in writing and everything. And but the thing that was he was they were it was a stroke of brilliance is that he realized that we were right of center because he started doing some Google searches on us and found us in Breitbart news on Breitbart site. And so he starts spreading throughout everybody at the school that we were conservatives. And at first, everybody was on our side and thought that what he was doing was reprehensible until they found out that we were conservative. And almost overnight, everybody flipped. And at least if they didn't side with him, they kept their distance from us. So when Steve Bannon was hired, by the Breitbart team, it was well known at the school that we were right of center. And then now we became the kind of their scratching post, and they just started coming at us pretty heavily at that time. And as I said, this was kind of like, Hollywood Central. It had everybody that was, had some major players in Hollywood were at this school. And it became so much so that, after Trump won, we had a great victory lap on campus the following day, but it was just, we became this kind of, pariah at the school. And we ended up having to leave because it was just too much for our family and too much for our daughter, who is just, a fourth grader at the time. And so we didn't want her to be in that environment. We felt it was unsafe for her. I'll give you one example. Adam Scott's kid and my daughter were a pair on this project in class, and they had to come up with a business concept as part of the assignment. And his child came up with a Trump torture chamber. And so we hear that,
My
and we're
God.
like, yeah. And this was a fourth grader, you know what I mean? So it was kind of like, if this is the level of discourse that these parents are teaching their kids, we cannot be involved in this anymore. So we ended up leaving that community and came a little bit farther, inland in the Los Angeles area. And yeah, that was kind of our venture away from Hollywood at that time.
Well, no, that wasn't a side note. That was a I mean that's absolutely awful that for people to take one thing that should be taken seriously for a moment, but then to figure out that you and your wife are right of center, and then for that to suddenly flip as if that matters, as if it matters like what someone's political persuasion is whenever they're making a credible sort of bringing something to light like that. It's just I mean it's just so it's just so saddening. I mean, it's like now I can't watch Severance the same way anymore.
I had a hard time watching Severance for. I didn't watch it the first season. I didn't
Hmm.
watch it until the second season came out. My wife was like, it's pretty good. We should watch it. So I ended up watching, but I was boycotting that show for a really long time. And it was one of those things where you kind of. I initially thought that Hollywood hated conservatives, and I think that there is a lot of that there. There's some of the more rabid activists are very much hate conservatives, but I would say most of the people there are more afraid of getting blacklisted or afraid of getting the stink of conservatism on them, and so they kind of they just distance themselves anytime that kind of situation comes up because it's a company town. And very long ago, they got control of the apparatus in Hollywood via the Hollywood journalism, via their trade unions, and via the school system that feeds those the industry. And they got control of it, and then they slowly just weeded out conservatives. It became basically we call it the Democrat Party's West Coast headquarters is Hollywood, and it really is. But more than that, it's really people are afraid because it
Hmm.
is a company town. It's just it's just this one source. A lot has changed since then, and I think we're right now at the precipice of just an incredible moment in the creative world with kind of like the things that have the mergers that have been happening and the buyouts, the kind of Netflix kind of losing out on the Paramount deal and what have you, and
Huge
the
story,
Warner
huge story.
Brothers deal. Huge story. And now you have Warner Brothers and Paramount under people that are a little bit more, friendly, let's say, to the right. And I think we are at a really a turning point, if I could borrow Charlie Kirk's term, in Hollywood, in that there's at least now hope uh, for uh, for conservatives to enter into this field. And it's something that what got me really to made me friends with Andrew. The reason why I decided to publish with him back in 2009 was it was basically what the story that he was telling out to the public and the launch of Big Hollywood at that time was really he was encouraging conservatives to get involved in acting, to get involved in screenwriting, to get involved in Hollywood, because Hollywood is what, in the storytelling industry in general, is what drives our culture. It defines what our culture is. And we've had incredible political, movers and activists on the right for, decades. We did a story on Phyllis Schlafly years ago where we followed her political campaign against the Equal Rights Amendment throughout the 70s, right up until 1980. And she had this incredible win against all odds against this equal rights amendment that was being passed or was just on the verge of becoming an amendment in the 70s. And she has this win. They basically wanted to remove gender from the American discourse, such that they could, like, it basically made abortions. It gave abortions a constitutional argument. It gave abortion a constitutional argument, the ERA, and various other things. Um, and they also were going to bring in, the draft to women and what have you. She wins this battle purely through politics. And so what Hollywood and kind of the left did at that time is they said, okay, well, if we can't win this politically, we're going to win this culturally. So they start flooding Hollywood with kind of the same messages that they were trying to codify into law or into a constitution with the Equal Rights Amendment. they just started putting it in their television shows and in their films and in their music and in their art and in their, literary books. And over the course of the next 20 years, everything that the ERA tried to get into the Constitution, they got in through the culture. And so we've been kind of big proponents on our show, Red Pilled America, about the importance of storytelling. In 2018, me and my wife, who's been my longtime business partner, started this storytelling podcast because we were like, wait a minute, being in the core of Hollywood and being around the people that are literally the architects of our culture, they did not want to hear our story. And we were exactly everything that they would want to hear. We're Latino. My grandparents were born in Mexico. My wife is a first generation, quote unquote Mexican American, although she considers herself an American, but her parents were both born in Mexico. This is exactly what the liberal left claims to, be champions of. And yet they didn't want to hear our story, and they didn't care to hear our story the second that they thought that we were right of center. And so we thought, we're going to launch this storytelling show, kind of continue this legacy that Andrew Breitbart started years ago, kind of trying to push the importance of storytelling. And now here we are at this kind of big moment where you have Warner Brothers and Paramount falling under the Ellisons, who are friendly to the right, and you have all of these technological tools that are breaking barriers and erasing the streaming kind of, or I said erasing the barriers that were once there. You have people like the Daily Wire coming forward now and producing content. It's a great time in regards to kind of us getting back into the culture fight.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, there's a lot of things to unpack there, and I just want to make sure I go down the list. I mean, first of all, you and Adriana do a fantastic job on your all show. I think
Thank you.
that just laying things out very clearly for the audience to understand. I haven't seen a whole lot of media that is doing it quite like you right now, so kudos to that. I wanted to kind of backtrack even on the some of the IRS targeting that you were talking about, because I mean that is sort of foundational, I would argue, to a lot of the weaponization origins that we began to see under the Obama administration. I mean, you have the whole Lois Lerner IRS scandal, which I would be hard pressed to disbelieve that that didn't have some sort of nexus to what you were going through at the time. I mean, there were so many conservatives that were targeted under that scandal, and obviously that investigation, if you want to call it that, was headed up by the former FBI director James Comey, and he did a terrible job actually investigating what was actually there. But then for that to sort of culminate later into Comey himself and John Brennan and sort of the propagating of the Russia collusion narrative that took place early in Trump's first term. I mean, you can paint a perfect picture of what had started initially as going after sort of the low-hanging fruit, these smaller fish, and culminating into trying to form this campaign to get Donald Trump, and how it persisted even after his first term with the weaponized cases that were brought by Jack Smith, and just frankly, it's just you can trace it all the way back to the origins of the Obama administration. So I just feel like I have to get that addressed clearly. One thing I wanted to ask you, I guess we can sort of segue into a little bit about our conversations about Andrew Breitbart now, and talk a little bit. I guess I'm curious, just the fact that you were a fan of Donald Trump for so long, and his celebrity, and obviously his show, The Celebrity Apprentice. I'm curious, from your perspective, or to your best recollection, and we're talking about this previously before we started recording, about just what it would be like now to witness Breitbart's reaction to Donald Trump, not just the current administration, but in his origins in that very landmark 2016 come up that Donald Trump sort of had. What was your sense of what Breitbart thought about Donald Trump just back then?
I don't have any sense of that, and I don't want to, impose or put any words into the man's mouth in that regard. I will say that he understood the power of Ronald Reagan, and this is something he spoke about, in 2009, 2010, 2008. he understood that Ronald Reagan was this man that understood Hollywood and understood how it impacted the culture, and understood that to bring that to the public within a political shell was an important combination. And I know that there's people that that cite Andrew saying that he didn't like Trump at one point. There's other people that say, oh, he would have loved Trump afterwards. I will say that he played an intricate role in getting him elected. His big story with Anthony Weiner in 2000, and I believe it was 2011 time frame, where he caught Anthony Weiner basically sending underwear pics to people. He just him and his team of journalists kind of drove down on that, and did not give up under constant attack by the CNNs of the world and the ABC Newses of the world. Ended up uncovering that, yes, he had in fact sent those pictures out. That ended up being a big pivotal moment during the Trump campaign, in that right leading up to the election day in 2016, they had to reopen the case against Hillary Clinton because they found emails on Anthony Weiner's site, his laptop, that was part of another investigation that had to do with the Weiner Gate story. So basically, once again gets caught sending these kinds of pictures to somebody, ended up being underage. And so they started investigating him for that. They look at his laptop. They find these emails that had to do with emails about Hillary's server. And so they reopen the case and against Hillary. And that happened right on the eve of the election of 2016. And Hillary would later come back and cite that as being the turning point. So Andrew had an impact on that 2016 election. We might not have Trump in office without Andrew Breitbart. But to kind of, I don't want to kind of project how Andrew would think about Trump, other than just the pure facts of what happened at that time, and how he viewed Hollywood and the importance of a figure like that. And Trump, without a doubt, ended up being that figure. And I think the Breitbart team out there, Alex Marlowe and Joel Pollack and John Nolte, and those guys were kind of in the mold of Andrew when it had to do with the importance of culture. And so I think that is why that website ended up getting behind Trump during that 2016. They played a very pivotal role in his campaign, or in getting his story out there, I should say, during that campaign.
Yeah, obviously, it's like we think of things like the butterfly effect, and what would have happened had he not died in 2012. But at the same time, it seems like just the direction that everything was going kind of seems almost like it feels natural that regardless of whether he lived or not, it seems like that was headed in that direction. And so I think that's something that remains sort of a constant throughout this story. I'm curious what types of conversations you two had about the nature of Hollywood and how it, in some ways, what you were sort of getting at when you're talking about your school that you were at. You're almost kind of lending some benefit of the doubt to these people that it's a culture of fear that they're embedded in. That it almost seemed like you were not to put words in your mouth, but you're almost like suggesting that you felt sorry for them. Not to say that they were justified to sort of adhere to that culture of fear, but because it is that culture, that there's not a whole lot that they can do. I mean, what were some of your all's musings together about how you could sort of break through whenever all of the odds were kind of stacked against you? Was it by doing these types of secret meetings that you were describing, or by trying to form coalitions, sort of away from the zeitgeist that was trying to break up those types of talks that you were having?
I think one of the things we were, and it was him, and also Nick Searcy, who's an actor in is a Hollywood actor. One of the guys been in so many movies. We became friends through the Friends of Abe, I should say. Guys like Andrew. One of the things that we would talk about is we needed more people to speak up. And if you saw the numbers at the Friends of Abe, in the Friends of Abe's, I mean, there was thousands of us. And if we all would have spoken out and come out publicly, it would have been, I think, a better environment for everybody that was public. And I think that there was at times maybe even some resentment. At least, I could speak for myself in that regard, and several others that were in Hollywood that were kind of out, of the closet. We were a little bit of there was a little bit of resentment for people that wouldn't come out of the closet because, as much as I say, yeah, I could kind of understand why you wouldn't. I was out there on a limb, and I had everything to lose, and my wife had everything to lose, and we were, we made above 75% of our money came from Hollywood and from Hollywood projects. So for us to come forward, we thought that there would have been a lot more that would have came forward at that time and just kind of spoke out, and very few did. And so I think that was kind of one of the conversations that we would often have. And I think at the end of the day, Friends of Abe, it broke up because there was a big a faction between the people that were pro Ted Cruz and people that were pro Trump during that kind of that hotly fought primary campaign of 2015, 2016. That created this crack in the FOA, and they ended up closing it down. So that was part of it, but I think it even started to crack before that because there was a lot of us that were out in the open, had already professed our kind of right of center leanings, and others weren't. And we're like, okay, what are we doing here? I mean, the secret stuff is fine, but at the same time, we do need to start speaking out, and we need to have some balls in that regard. Otherwise, nothing is going to change. And so, and that said, I understand it. I understand why people won't do it. No, not everybody wants to kind of, um, you know, be the first ones through the door, I guess. They'll let everybody else kind of go through the door and take the shots. But, at the time, it was definitely something that we were talking about a lot. But one of the main things that Andrew drove home to me was this idea that politics is downstream of culture. It was something that I think I innately understood, and I think he actually we started to do a story on this before, just kind of trying to broadcast that message through our show, and I couldn't find any instance of him saying that except in one spot in his special thanks section of his book, Righteous Indignation. He actually said it to me, and so I was kind of like really felt a responsibility to continue that message and get that and continue that legacy of his, moving forward. I think that was kind of one of the biggest conversations that we would have is just kind of the importance of this and not letting go of it. It's very hard if you're in the right wing world, especially prior to just this last couple years of kind of not just going all into politics because there's no infrastructure on the right for filmmakers. I can't tell you how many people that were in the filmmaking space that were right of center that kind of have left it entirely because there was no infrastructure there for them to promote their films, to get financing. There's no kind of the big moneyed conservatives out there weren't putting money into it because they view it as kind of like a black hole. Not seeing how important it is and how much it drives the culture and how much it not only seeps into the films and television, but it starts seeping into sports. You start seeing, trans cheerleaders in the NFL, and then you start seeing, Pride Month in the MLB, and you start seeing, NBA guys doing the knee during the George Floyd stuff. It's if you allow one party to take control of Hollywood, it seeps into these ancillary quote unquote conservative spaces because sports is considered conservative. You start to see it seep into these areas. And so I think that was one of the main things that Andrew would drive home to me and occupied a lot of our conversations.
Mm. I'm curious your thoughts now. We just talked about briefly the merger and how the Netflix attempted acquisition of Warner Brothers fell through. that was huge news, and all the way from LA to Washington, I think, in a lot of respects, because you were touching there on the fact that now that we have Paramount and Warner Brothers coming together, and the Ellison connection there, it would seem like it would be no better opportunity at this point to try to seize on this, to actually try to create content and media that would be sort of help that sort of downstream effect that we always talk about when it comes to Breitbart's philosophy. I'm curious. I mean, it seems like uh, almost at every turn, these efforts to create culturally conservative media, sometimes they work out, but oftentimes they're marred with different problems. That being just finding the support in the first hand. On the second hand, sometimes the result or the quality can be hit or miss. But we're talking about two legacy giants here right now. And that's a huge opportunity here, I think, to actually sort of take hold of the control room of what is being pumped out of Hollywood. I mean, what needs to happen right now at this moment in order to not squander the opportunity that has been set forth? Because it seems like it's right there, it's teed up. But do you have any concerns about there being a possibility that this may not result in the way that we want it to go? I mean, what should we be paying attention to make sure that we actually seize the opportunity that this type of merger has presented, especially creators and directors and producers who are in the conservative world who want to actually make a change?
It's a great question, and thank you for asking that because it's not something that people think a lot about. And I think at the end of the day, part of the problem on the right is that most of the conservative influencers that are out there spend 99.9% of their time poo-pooing Hollywood content. And they have created this culture within the right that completely rejects Hollywood to their detriment. And I think that that is probably the biggest barrier, surprisingly enough, is not necessarily the left right now. It's the right and its lack of vision in regards to um, what it takes to infiltrate this cultural institution. You, they're constantly going at the right for things that are at times marginal at best. Just any reason to attack Hollywood. And I have probably been, a perpetrator of that at times. I've definitely, over the course of the last 5 years, have looked at that a little bit differently. And I think that we have to set up an ecosystem that allows many right of center people that are already in Hollywood to address the quality issue that you mentioned, because it is an important one. People just want to watch entertainment and they want to be entertained, and if it's crappy kind of preachy right of center things, or maybe even religious based content, nobody wants to be preached to, and they see good quality content. There are people within Hollywood that can create that content, but if they don't have the support system to go out there and promote the film and promote their artistry, then they will hesitate to go into that space. So I'd say right now, the area that is the biggest kind of barrier is this kind of conservative blackout on anything that comes out of Hollywood. I mean, there has been several films this last year that conservative media should have gotten behind purely from the message alone. There's this film that was put out by Will Arnett called "Is This Thing On?" It was, I think, possibly one of the most pro-marriage movies I have ever seen. Anybody that's in a marriage, having difficulty in their marriage, if you see that movie and you catch the money line at the end, you're going to be you're going to have a good chance of saving your marriage if you are in love with your mate. Things like that. Things like Marty Supreme, which seems like just kind of this
Mm.
chaotic movie, and at the very end, it's what gives one of the most pro-family messages that I've seen in film in quite some time. Conservative media.
I'm glad you brought that up, because that was a my of all the mind-blowing parts of that movie and just the shocker moments, that was the cherry on top. I mean, the way that it ends with, I don't want to spoil it,
Yeah.
but I completely agree with what you're saying. I just saw that a few weeks ago. But yeah,
Yeah,
continue.
and it was one of those moments where, you know, I got kind of emotional watching it, and I'm like, we need to promote these kinds of things because if those kinds of films become very popular, I mean, Is This Thing On didn't even barely make a blip. If that kind of content is well received throughout mainstream America, throughout the Rust Belt, whatever you want to call it, throughout you know, this kind of right of center world, they will make more of it. They will take some chances in that space, and you're already starting to see right now. There was a you know a some kind of a film event. I think it was in Europe, where they started asking all of these actors about the political things that were happening at the time, and almost to a T, they all kind of avoided talking about politics and said, "I don't want to talk about politics right now." So they are starting to feel this kind of shift potentially that's at least possible right now. But we need to be able to create an ecosystem to where these people can promote their artistry and go into these spaces so that they could, you know, see that they have a career at the end of the day if they are to make that kind of content. And the right continues to kind of be more of an attack vector against Hollywood rather than, you know, kind of push and promote. I mean, perfect example, you are one of the few people that has reached out to even discuss our show. Okay, I've been around conservative politics since 2009. Our show has been out since 2018. There's no storytelling show like ours, you know, in conservative media. I mean, there you'll have little blips of it here and there. Well, someone will do a small project here and there, but there's no consistent show like ours. We've been around since 2008, 18, excuse me. Nothing. Like, we don't get hardly any coverage. Occasionally, we'll get a call from here and there and people. So we're completely running on our kind of our own kind of moxie, and, you know, with the help of iHeartRadio, who's been an incredible partner. Um, but there's just not enough people. We're all siloed off. And, you know, you have your Daily Wire camp here and the people they deal with, and you have the Blaze people here, and then you have like the Fox people here, and there's a little bit of crosstalk, but not so much. If you're not within their ecosystem, they don't want to promote you. That's not how the left works. The left is like they're having them on their Tonight shows and on their late night things, and they're on the Today Show on this network, and then on this other network, they're on the Good Morning America. I mean, they're constantly promoting their cultural
Mm,
content, and they're creating a farm league to develop artists, and they know, okay, this is a space where I can actually have a career. We need
mhm,
to send that message out to the public that you can have a career and produce family friendly, you know, right of center friendly content, and you will have a place to promote it. And I think that's
mhm,
probably the biggest kind of roadblock right now. And then you know, you start going down the line. You look at film schools. That's a whole nother thing. I mean, you try to get. We just went through this with our daughter, who's, you know, great in the film space. She's just her mind thinks around storytelling and kind of structure and what have you. You start to go out there and start to look for film schools that she can go to. And, you know, initially you start with going to all the red states and areas that are considered more right of center in regards to their you know, potentially their politics. Nothing. There's no kind of infrastructure there. You are going into the belly of the beast. You're going into the middle of Hollywood, the middle of New York, to kind of to potentially, you know, enter into that space. So that's a whole nother thing, and that I think will end up becoming coming out later. You have cities like, you know, Nashville kind of coming up, and that's kind of growing a little bit, and places like Austin, which is still considered left of center, but at least it's within a right of center state. Dallas is
mhm.
also starting to do some things right now, so that will come. But until we set up a promotional ecosystem, I think that's the first step.
I couldn't agree more. And yeah, it's funny you mentioned Nashville because I was having a conversation the other day with some colleagues, and we were sort of debating sort of the pros and cons. I mean, it's been a few years now, but the pros and cons of Daily Wire's moving their headquarters out to Nashville. I mean, now Nashville's a place that I love. It's a place I would probably live if if I had a reason to live there. And on one hand, I do get why they want to try to maybe cultivate a presence there, given the fact that it does serve as an entertainment hub, and it's a contrast from Hollywood, and it's a much easier, I would say, to carve out a niche. I always tell people who are artists that I think that if you're a musician, you probably have a better chance of blowing up if you are, well, just for example, from where I'm from, Oklahoma, and you decide to, try to make it big there by showing yourself to a variety of different venues that are always looking to have talent come in, versus if you were to go I don't know. I mean, like Austin is a great place, but there's a lot of competition there. So it's like I understand kind of the strategy behind going to a place where maybe the competition is less. That way you can try to make yourself as more of a beacon. But at the same token, I did kind of just thinking about Daily Wire and being in Nashville. I mean, look at the opportunity now. I mean, if you could have had the foresight, maybe you would have, maybe Ben Shapiro would have thought about maybe staying out there in LA. Perhaps because now there's a chance to really shift Hollywood. But obviously that decision's been, said and done. I don't think it's been a detriment by any means, but I do kind of question it sometimes, whether it would be better to try to, like the Lord calls us, to go into the cities, to, preach to those who, don't know. And it's like, to sort of leave the city, it almost like feels like a bit of a retreat. But I digress. I understand there's a lot of strategic reasons why you'd want to be out in Nashville. I don't, wholeheartedly disagree with it, but I do wonder sometimes, what would happen if things were different and they decided to stay out there. Perhaps a new sort of cultural medium will appear on the West Coast. For example, I mean, we have the California Post emerging out of the New York Post, and it seems they're focusing a lot of their content covering West Coast news. And obviously the New York Post is no stranger to Hollywood affairs, so it'll be interesting to see what happens over the next few years, and if we actually do wind up getting more content that is both good in quality, up for Academy Award level quality, and potentially, giving a good message. And I hope that we see it, because
You said
it's desperately
something.
needed.
You said something there that I think hit this memory that I had, and I couldn't agree with you more. I think it did feel a little bit like a retreat. I do think what the Daily Wire guys have done has been phenomenal, and I applaud them for that. There was a moment where we were thinking about moving to Nashville, and we were right at the juncture of my daughter going to high school. And so we applied to kind of the private school out there that was kind of like the private school to go to. And she gets in. And so we're really excited. And so we go and we start, okay, well, now we're making a big move. We're leaving our family here in the LA area. Do we want to do this? So I started looking into the school a little bit more. And it was, they had this program called Melanin Mentors, where brown people would teach the white people about being brown, basically, and what it's like being brown.
Oh gosh.
And I'm like, okay, I'm going to leave LA, take my entire family, uproot my family, leave the rest of my extended family behind, and go all the way out to Nashville so that my daughter can be, part of this Melanin Mentor community. I'm like, no, no, it doesn't make any sense. It's everywhere. The point I'm trying to make is it's everywhere. And we just happen to be at the tip of the spear here in Los Angeles, having been, watching this illegal immigration kind of take over this. I'm a born and raised, Los Angeles suburb guy. And to see how this state has changed since immigration has just been, illegal immigration has flooded into California. But you see it happening in all these other areas. If you actually look at the numbers in places like Nashville and its surrounding areas, and you start to see that same infiltration happening there. So there's no real way to avoid it. There's no place you can go. You'll avoid it for a little while, but it's going to get there eventually. Might as well be on the front lines and stay within the fight in an area like California like we've decided to do, than to uproot our family and just kind of go where the beginnings of that is happening. in places like Nashville.
Right. Yeah. It's same slop, different town is what I would say.
Exactly.
as
Exactly.
as the kids would say, perhaps. Well, Patrick, this has been one of the fastest hours I think I've ever had go by, because I think it's just been such a great conversation the whole way through. And I think it's a great, spot to end it, just to end it on a high note. But I want to extend you the open door offer to always feel free to come back on this show to talk about other events. I think we could do a lot talking about some current events next time, but I just wanted to kind of introduce more people to your work and some of your background, and why it's so important, I think, to have fighters on the ground like yourself who have these very unique origins and have been able to show that you can find the through line between culture and politics, just like Andrew Breitbart did. And I think that you're carrying on a tremendous fight, and look forward to seeing more of your work. And I'll pin some of it down in the description below. So thanks so much, and feel free to kind of tell people yourself where they can find you.
Of course, we're at redpilledamerica.com. And my wife also has a fashion blog over on Instagram called Adriana_Jade. Go check that out if you're kind of, in need of some fashion tips. She's incredible at that. And thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate it. Anything we could do to promote your show, please let us know, and find a way to have you on our show as well too. It's we need more people talking about culture right now. I'm telling you, this is a big moment for the right, and we can't squander it by just purely thinking short term. We have to think long term and think about how we are going to infiltrate these cultural institutions, because it'll make the political fights much easier if we have already inundated the community and the bloodstream of America with ideas that will help America prosper. So thank you again for having me on the show. I really appreciate it.
Thanks, Patrick, and thanks for watching this, and we'll see you guys in the next one.
Meme Rich. Meme Rich. Meme Rich.